The first time the bullet struck the wooden post beside Olivia Sutton's head, she barely flinched. The second time, she straightened her spine and kept walking, ignoring the jeers that followed her down the dusty main street of Redemption Creek. The year was 1875, and this small settlement in the Arizona Territory had become her personal purgatory. "Missed again, Tanner," one of the men called out with raucous laughter, "though not sure why you'd waste good lead on a useless woman." Olivia clutched her worn leather satchel tighter, feeling the medical instruments inside. 3 years of medical training in Boston training she'd fought tooth and nail to receive, and here she was, the laughingstock of a frontier town too backward to accept a female doctor. "The only thing she's good for is stirring up trouble," another voice shouted. Olivia kept her gaze forward, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her pain. Her father's death 6 months ago had left her with nothing but debts, and a promise she'd made at his bedside to bring proper medical care to this forgotten corner of the West. So far, all she'd managed to do was become the town pariah. "Hey, Doc." Tanner Harrison, the town's self-appointed ringleader of torment, stepped into her path. "My wife's feeling poorly. Think you could bleed her dry like you did old man Jenkins?" Olivia felt her cheeks burn. Jenkins had been beyond saving when they'd brought him to her, gut shot and septic. Nothing could have saved him, but the town had needed someone to blame. "Step aside, Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Tanner leaned in closer, the stench of whiskey on his breath. "Or what? You'll prescribe me to death." Laughter erupted from the group of men lounging outside the saloon. Olivia prepared herself for more abuse when the distinctive sound of spurs jangling on wooden planks cut through the commotion. "That's enough, Tanner." The voice was deep, unfamiliar, and carried enough authority to make everyone turn. Olivia glanced over her shoulder to see a tall man standing at the edge of the boardwalk. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jaw dusted with stubble. A leather vest hung open over a faded blue shirt, and a gun belt sat low on his hips. "Mind your business, stranger," Tanner snapped. The man stepped forward, sunlight revealing features weathered by sun and wind, yet strikingly handsome. He couldn't have been more than 30 years old, but his eyes held the wisdom of someone who'd seen far more than his years suggested. "When a man torments a lady in the middle of the street, I make it my business." He moved with a languid confidence that belied the tension in his shoulders. "Especially when that lady's got the courage to do something none of you seem capable of helping folks who need it." "She ain't no doctor," Tanner scoffed. "She's useless, killed more than she's saved." The stranger's hand didn't move toward his gun, but something in his posture changed, making the air suddenly feel charged. "Way I see it, she's worth more than any of you standing here. Takes guts to heal in a place that doesn't want healing." Olivia stood frozen, unsure whether to be grateful for the intervention or mortified by becoming an even bigger spectacle. The stranger tipped his hat to her. "Kyle Prescott, madam, new foreman at the Hawkins Ranch." "Olivia Sutton," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Tanner spat in the dirt. "You'll learn soon enough, Prescott. This town don't need her kind." Kyle's eyes never left Olivia's. "Maybe this town doesn't know what it needs." He gestured down the street. "Allow me to escort you to your destination, Miss Sutton." Before she could respond, he was beside her, offering his arm as if they were promenading in a Boston garden rather than standing in the dust of a frontier town where she was despised. "I can manage," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "No doubt," he replied, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "But my mama raised me to be a gentleman, and she'd haunt me from her grave if I let a lady walk alone while those vultures circled." Against her better judgment, Olivia nodded, aware of the stares boring into her back as Kyle Prescott escorted her down the street. "Don't mind them," he said quietly. "People fear what they don't understand." "And what makes you different, Mr. Prescott?" she asked. He glanced down at her, his eyes the color of a summer storm. "I've seen enough death to appreciate anyone trying to prevent it." Something in his tone silenced any further questions. They walked in quiet understanding until they reached her small office at the edge of town. "Thank you," she said, finally releasing her death grip on her satchel. "Just doing what any decent man would do," he replied, though they both knew that wasn't true, not in Redemption Creek. "They'll make you a target now, too," she warned. Kyle Prescott's smile was slight but genuine. "Wouldn't be the first time," he touched the brim of his hat. "Good day, Miss Sutton." As he walked away, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a small flicker of hope. She quickly squashed it down. Hope was dangerous in a place like this. But as she unlocked her office door, she couldn't help but wonder about the stranger who defended her when no one else would. Little did she know, Kyle Prescott was wondering about her too. The following morning, Olivia woke before dawn, as she always did. Her small living quarters behind her medical office were sparse but functional: a narrow bed, a washstand, a trunk containing her few possessions. She splashed cold water on her face and pinned her chestnut hair into a severe bun, her fingers working with practiced efficiency. She had just finished heating coffee on her small stove when a pounding at her door made her jump. Emergency calls at this hour were rare but not unheard of. Grabbing her robe, she hurried to answer it. "Miss Sutton." A young boy of about 12 stood on her doorstep, his freckled face pale with worry. "It's Pa. He's been kicked by one of the new horses. Ma says he's bleeding something awful." Olivia recognized him as Timothy Walsh, whose family owned a small ranch just outside town. "Give me 2 minutes to dress, Timothy. Tell me where he's hurt while I gather my supplies." "His chest, madam. The horse caught him right in the ribs. He can't hardly breathe." Olivia's mind cataloged possibilities: broken ribs, punctured lung, internal bleeding. All life-threatening out here, miles from a proper hospital. "Run to the livery and tell Mr. Gunderson I need my horse saddled immediately." The boy nodded and took off running as Olivia rushed to change. 5 minutes later, she was riding hard toward the Walsh ranch, her medical bag secured to her saddle. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, casting the desert landscape in shades of purple and gold. When she arrived, she found Mr. Walsh sprawled on the kitchen floor, his wife pressing a blood-soaked cloth to his chest. The wound was severe, 2 ribs visibly broken, one having punctured the skin. "Everyone out except Mrs. Walsh," Olivia ordered, shrugging off her coat. "I need hot water, clean towels, and all the lamps you can light." For the next hour, she worked methodically, cleaning the wound, extracting bone fragments, and suturing damaged tissue. When she finally straightened, her back aching and hands cramped, Mr. Walsh's breathing had stabilized. "He'll need absolute rest for at least 2 weeks, she told Mrs. Walsh. "The ribs will take months to fully heal. I'll leave laudanum for the pain, but use it sparingly." Mrs. Walsh clutched her hand. "Thank you, doctor. I don't know what we would have done, Mama." Timothy burst into the kitchen. "Riders coming. It's Mr. Harrison and some men from town." Olivia felt her stomach drop. "How many?" "5 or 6, and they don't look friendly." Mrs. Walsh looked confused. "What do they want?" "Me," Olivia said grimly, wiping blood from her hands. "They've been looking for reasons to run me out of town since I arrived." Sure enough, moments later, Tanner Harrison's voice boomed from outside. "Walsh, get out here. We heard the doctor woman's at your place." Mrs. Walsh's face hardened. "You saved my husband's life." "I won't let them. It's all right," Olivia interrupted. "I'll handle this." She stepped onto the porch, keenly aware of her blood-stained apron and disheveled appearance. Tanner sat atop his horse, flanked by 5 other men. "Well, look at you," he sneered, "covered in poor Walsh's blood." "He dead yet. Mr. Walsh is stable," she replied coldly. "No thanks to you delaying my work." "That's so." Tanner dismounted, hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Funny thing is, we were just at the Hawkins Ranch. Seems they had a man injured last night, 2 crushed arm in a cattle press. But instead of calling for you, they rode 20 miles to get Doc Simmons from Silver Springs." The words stung more than they should have. "That's their choice, is it? Or maybe they know what happens to folks who let you treat them." He stepped closer. "Maybe it's time you packed up and moved on, Miss Sutton, before someone else gets hurt." "Is threatening a lady your idea of morning entertainment, Harrison?" The familiar voice made Olivia's heart skip. Kyle Prescott emerged from around the side of the house, leading his horse. He must have arrived while she was working on Mr. Walsh. Prescott, Tanner growled. Should have known you'd be sniffing around. Kyle ignored him, addressing Olivia instead. Mr. Hawkins sent me to find you, madam. Seems one of our hands got his arm caught in equipment last night. Doc Simmons patched him up, but he's concerned about infection. Asked if you might have some of that carbolic acid you mentioned at the general store yesterday. It was a transparent lie. She hadn't been to the general store yesterday, but a clever one. Kyle was publicly demonstrating the ranch owner's confidence in her medical knowledge. I have some in my bag, she replied, playing along. I can prepare a solution. Appreciate it, Kyle said, then turned to Tanner. Funny thing about being new in town, Harrison. You hear all sorts of tales about people, but I've learned to judge folks by their actions, not rumors. His voice hardened. And right now, I'm seeing a woman who rode out at dawn to save a man's life while you're just a bully with too much time on his hands. Tanner's face flushed dark red. You're making a mistake, Prescott. Wouldn't be my first, Kyle replied easily. Now, I believe Miss Sutton has patients to attend to, so unless you gentlemen need medical attention, I suggest you move along. For a moment, Olivia thought Tanner might draw his gun. Instead, he spat on the ground near her feet. This isn't over, he warned before mounting his horse. Not by a long shot. As the men rode away, Olivia felt her knees weaken. Kyle was at her side instantly, a steadying hand at her elbow. You all right? Yes, she lied, then amended no. But I will be, she studied his face. There's no injured ranch hand, is there? The corner of his mouth quirked up. No, madam, I was riding by and saw the gathering. Seemed like you might need reinforcement. That's twice now you've intervened on my behalf, Mr. Prescott. People will talk. Let them, he said simply. I've never much cared for other people's opinions. She smiled despite herself. Thank you, though I'm not sure you've done yourself any favors. Kyle shrugged. I've faced worse than Tanner Harrison and his cronies. He glanced at the house. How's Walsh really doing? He'll recover with time and care. She hesitated. Would you like some coffee? Mrs. Walsh made a fresh pot before all this excitement. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or pleasure. I'd like that very much, Miss Sutton. As they walked back into the house, Olivia felt the weight on her shoulders lighten, just a fraction. For the first time since arriving in Redemption Creek, she didn't feel completely alone. Over the next 2 weeks, Olivia's life fell into an unexpected pattern. She'd rise early, see to her few patients, mostly women and children, or men desperate enough to risk the town's scorn, and invariably, Kyle Prescott would find some reason to cross her path. Sometimes he'd stop by her office with minor injuries, a cut hand, a bruised shoulder, clearly manufactured excuses to see her. Other times, he'd appear just as she was closing up, offering to walk her to the general store or the small restaurant where she occasionally treated herself to dinner. They were careful to maintain propriety, always meeting in public, their conversations purposefully casual. Yet Olivia found herself looking forward to these encounters with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. One evening, as they walked along the creek that gave the town its name, Kyle asked the question she'd been dreading. Why do they hate you so much? It can't just be because you're a woman doctor. Olivia sighed, watching the water flow over smooth stones. When I first arrived, there was an influenza outbreak. I treated everyone I could, but several children died. One of them was Mayor Blackwell's grandson. She swallowed hard. He blamed me, said I used experimental treatments that killed the boy. It wasn't true. The child was too far gone when they brought him to me, but grief needs a target. Kyle was quiet for a long moment. And Harrison, what's his stake in all this? His wife was expecting their first child. She had complications, and Olivia closed her eyes briefly. I couldn't save either of them. Tanner was away on a cattle drive. By the time he returned, the town had already decided I was incompetent at best, dangerous at worst. So he became their champion against you? Yes. It's easier to blame someone than to accept that medicine has limitations, especially out here. Kyle stopped walking and turned to face her. You could leave, start fresh somewhere else. The suggestion stung, though she knew he meant well. Is that what you think I should do, run away? No, he said firmly. I think you should stay and prove them wrong, but it wouldn't make you a coward if you chose an easier path." Olivia felt a surge of emotion, gratitude that he understood, determination to vindicate herself, and something else, something warm and frightening that blossomed whenever he looked at her that way. "My father was a doctor," she said softly. "He believed medicine was a calling, not just a profession. When he died, I promised him I'd bring healing to places that needed it most." She gestured around them. "This is such a place, whether they know it or not." Kyle's expression softened. "You're a remarkable woman, Olivia Sutton." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it made her breath catch. "I'm just doing what I was trained to do." "No," he said, his voice low. "You're doing what most people wouldn't have the courage to do, standing your ground when it would be easier to flee." They were standing very close now, the evening breeze carrying the scent of sage and pine. For one wild moment, Olivia thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, clearing his throat. "It's getting dark. I should see you home." The spell broken, Olivia nodded, both relieved and disappointed. As they walked back toward town, their hands brushed once, twice, until Kyle's fingers gently captured hers. He didn't look at her, and she didn't acknowledge the touch. But their hands remained linked until they reached the edge of town, where propriety demanded they part. That night, Olivia lay awake long after she should have been sleeping, replaying the feeling of his calloused hand against hers, wondering what it might be like to be held by him completely. She chided herself for such thoughts. She'd come west to practice medicine, not to lose her heart to a cowboy, no matter how honorable he seemed. But as sleep finally claimed her, it was Kyle Prescott's storm-gray eyes she saw, not the medical textbooks she'd been determined to focus on. Morning brought an unexpected visitor to Olivia's door. Charlotte Weber, the wife of the town's banker, stood on her doorstep, wringing her hands nervously. "Mrs. Weber," Olivia said, surprise evident in her voice. The banker's wife had always crossed the street to avoid her before. "Are you ill?" "No, doctor, it's my daughter Margaret. She's—" Charlotte glanced over her shoulder as if afraid of being overheard. "She's with child, unmarried." Olivia understood immediately the desperation that would bring this proud woman to her door. "Please, come inside." Over tea, Charlotte explained that 17-year-old Margaret had fallen in love with a young man who'd promptly abandoned her when he discovered her condition. The family's standing in the community would be destroyed if word got out. "We've tried to hide it, but she's beginning to show. My husband wants to send her to a home for unwed mothers in Denver, but she's terrified." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "She says she'd rather die." "And what do you want, Mrs. Weber?" Olivia asked gently. "I want my daughter to live," Charlotte whispered. "I want her child to live." She straightened her shoulders. "I want you to deliver the baby secretly and help us find a good family to take it." It was a risky proposition. If discovered, it would confirm everything the town believed about her lack of ethics. But looking at the desperate mother before her, Olivia couldn't refuse. "Bring Margaret to me tonight after dark. We'll examine her and make a plan." Charlotte sagged with relief. "Thank you, doctor. I don't know how to repay. You can repay me by remembering this moment," Olivia said firmly. "Remember that you came to me when you needed help that no one else would provide." That evening, Olivia confirmed that Margaret was indeed 5 months pregnant and in good health, though dangerously undernourished from trying to hide her condition. She provided vitamins, dietary advice, and a plan to deliver the baby at the Webers' remote hunting cabin when the time came. As she was escorting them out the back door, she was startled by a knock at the front. Opening it cautiously, she found Kyle standing there, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Mr. Prescott," she said, acutely aware of the Webers hiding in her back room. "This is unexpected." "I apologize for the late hour," he said. "I was hoping to speak with you about a private matter." Olivia hesitated. "I'm afraid I have a situation I'm attending to. Perhaps tomorrow." Understanding dawned in his eyes as he caught sight of a woman's shawl hastily hidden behind her door. "Of course, it's nothing urgent." He stepped back, replacing his hat. "Good night, Miss Sutton." After the Webers had gone, Olivia found herself both disappointed and relieved that Kyle had left. What had he wanted to discuss? And what would he think of her helping to conceal Margaret's pregnancy? She needn't have worried. The next day, Kyle appeared at her office with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Prenatal tonics," he said quietly, placing it on her desk. "My sister had difficult pregnancies. These herbs helped her. Thought they might be useful to someone in your care." Olivia stared at him, astonished by his perception and discretion. "How did you know?" "The look on your face last night. Same one my sister's midwife wore when she was protecting her patients." He met her gaze steadily. "Your secrets are safe with me, Olivia." In that moment, something shifted between them, a deepening of trust that went beyond their casual encounters. Impulsively, Olivia reached across the desk and squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she said simply. Kyle's fingers tightened around hers. "You don't have to thank me for being decent." "In my experience, decency is rare enough to merit gratitude." He smiled then, a warm, genuine smile that made her heart flutter. "Maybe you've just been keeping company with the wrong sort of people." "Maybe," she agreed, returning his smile. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of a patient, Mrs. Gomez, bringing her son with a broken wrist, but the connection lingered. A silent understanding that grew stronger with each passing day. As summer heat settled over Redemption Creek, Olivia found herself busier than she'd been since arriving. Word had somehow spread among the women of the town that she could be trusted with delicate matters, and her back door saw a steady stream of visitors seeking help with female complaints, difficult pregnancies, or children's ailments that the husbands wouldn't waste money treating. Kyle, meanwhile, had become a fixture in her life. He'd stop by with small gifts, fresh eggs from the ranch chickens, wildflowers he'd picked on the trail, a book of poetry he'd found in Silver Springs. Never anything expensive or inappropriate, but each gift showed thoughtfulness that touched her deeply. They began taking supper together twice a week at the small restaurant run by a French-Canadian couple who didn't participate in the town's gossip. These evenings were precious to Olivia, hours of conversation about books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they harbored. She learned that Kyle had fought for the Union in the war despite being only 16 when he enlisted, that he'd spent years drifting afterward, taking whatever work would keep him moving, unable to settle after the horrors he'd witnessed. He spoke of his childhood in Pennsylvania, of parents long dead, and a sister in Chicago he hadn't seen in years. In turn, she told him about her battle to attend medical school, of professors who refused to teach her, of classmates who sabotaged her work. She spoke of her father's unwavering support and the grief that still ambushed her at unexpected moments. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked one evening as they lingered over coffee. "Becoming a doctor, I mean. It seems to have cost you so much." Olivia considered the question seriously. "No," she finally said. "There are moments like when I lose a patient or face people like Tanner Harrison when I question my choices. But then I deliver a healthy baby or see a child recover from fever, and I know this is what I was meant to do." She smiled ruefully. "What about you?" "Any regrets about defending the town pariah?" Kyle's eyes never left her face. "Only that I didn't arrive in Redemption Creek sooner." The intensity of his gaze made her blush. They were treading dangerous ground, moving beyond friendship into something neither of them had named. Before she could respond, the restaurant door burst open and Timothy Walsh rushed in, his face streaked with tears. "Dr. Sutton, come quick, it's Jessie. She fell from the hayloft." Olivia was on her feet instantly. "How long ago is she breathing?" "About 10 minutes. Pa sent me to fetch you right away. She's breathing, but there's blood coming from her ears." Kyle threw money on the table. "My horse is outside. He's faster than yours." Without waiting for her response, he lifted her medical bag and headed for the door. Minutes later, they were galloping toward the Walsh ranch, Olivia seated in front of Kyle, his arms around her as he controlled the powerful stallion. Under different circumstances, she might have been flustered by such proximity, but all she could think about was little Jessie Walsh, only 8 years old, with potential brain injuries that could kill her or leave her permanently disabled. When they arrived, they found the family huddled around the unconscious child. Olivia worked quickly, examining Jessie's pupils, checking her breathing and pulse. She has a concussion, possibly a skull fracture, she told the terrified parents. The blood from her ears confirms it. We need to keep her very still and watch her closely. For the next 3 hours, Olivia monitored the little girl, applying cold compresses to reduce swelling and administering tiny amounts of laudanum when she began to stir in pain. Kyle remained the entire time, heating water, preparing bandages, and keeping the other Walsh children occupied with stories. It was well past midnight when Jessie finally opened her eyes and recognized her parents. The relief in the room was palpable. "She'll need complete rest for at least 2 weeks," Olivia instructed. "No excitement, no bright lights. I'll come check on her tomorrow." As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Walsh embraced her tightly. "Thank you, Doctor. We're blessed to have you in Redemption Creek, no matter what others say." Emotionally and physically exhausted, Olivia barely registered the cold night air as they stepped outside. Kyle led his horse by the reins rather than mounting. "It's a beautiful night for a walk," he said, "if you're not too tired." She should have insisted on riding, but the thought of a quiet walk under the stars with Kyle was too tempting to resist. A walk sounds perfect. They moved slowly, the moonlight illuminating their path, Kyle's horse following obediently behind them. The night was alive with sounds: crickets chirping, an owl hooting in the distance, the soft rustle of wind through grass. "You were amazing back there," Kyle said after they'd walked in comfortable silence for a while. "The way you knew exactly what to do, how to comfort everyone while still focusing on Jessie." Olivia felt a flush of pleasure at his praise. "It's what I'm trained for." "No, it's more than training. It's who you are." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Olivia, I've been trying to find the right moment, the right words." Her heart began to race. "For what? To tell you that I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, beautiful and terrifying. "Kyle," she whispered, uncertain how to respond. He took her hands in his. "I know it's too soon. I know you came here to be a doctor, not to find a husband, but I can't keep pretending I feel nothing when I'm with you." "It's not that," she said, her voice trembling. "It's just I've worked so hard to be taken seriously, if we were to." She couldn't even say it. "If we were to court properly," he finished for her, "you think it would undermine your position as a physician." "Yes, and what about you? The men at the ranch already make comments about your lady doctor." "If we were openly together, they'd never respect you as foreman." Kyle's laugh surprised her. "Olivia, I don't give a damn what they think, and frankly, neither should you." His hands tightened on hers. "We get one life. Why spend it denying ourselves happiness because of other people's small-mindedness?" Put that way, her objections seemed foolish. Still, she hesitated. "I've never been in love before. I'm not sure I know how." His smile was tender as he released one of her hands to touch her cheek. "Neither do I. But I'd like to learn with you." The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility. Then, with gentle deliberation, Kyle lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Olivia found herself responding, her free hand moving to his shoulder as the kiss deepened. Heat bloomed in her chest, spreading outward until she felt light-headed with it. When they finally parted, both breathing unsteadily, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "Tell me to stop pursuing you and I will. Tell me you feel nothing and I'll never speak of this again." Olivia knew she should do exactly that: preserve her independence, focus on her practice, avoid complications. Instead, she said, "I can't tell you that, because it would be a lie." His smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. He kissed her again, briefly but with unmistakable promise. "Then we'll figure out the rest together." As they resumed their walk toward town, hands linked between them, Olivia felt as though she'd crossed some invisible boundary. For better or worse, her life in Redemption Creek had just become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more precious. Over the next month, Olivia and Kyle navigated their budding relationship with cautious joy. They were discreet. Redemption Creek was too small for true privacy, but they avoided public displays that might cause scandal. Still, people noticed the changed dynamic between them, the way their eyes sought each other across rooms, the lingering farewells when they parted. To Olivia's surprise, her medical practice actually improved. Women who had previously avoided her now came openly, saying that if Mr. Prescott trusted her with his health, they could too. Even some of the ranch hands began stopping by with injuries they would have previously ignored or treated themselves. Not everyone was pleased with this development. Tanner Harrison and his allies watched with growing resentment as Olivia's standing in the community slowly improved. Mayor Blackwell made pointed comments about proper boundaries when he spotted Kyle escorting her from church one Sunday. And Mrs. Prescott, the banker's wife, now greeted Olivia warmly in public, having become secretly dependent on her care for Margaret. One evening in late August, Kyle invited Olivia to the Hawkins ranch for supper. "The boss wants to meet you properly," he explained. "His wife's been having headaches and he's heard good things about your treatment of migraines." Olivia was both flattered and nervous. Edward Hawkins was the most influential man in the county, a former Texas Ranger who'd built one of the largest cattle operations in the territory. His approval could change everything for her practice. She wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton with modest lace trim, and spent extra time arranging her hair in a style that was professional yet feminine. Kyle arrived to escort her in a borrowed buggy, looking uncharacteristically formal in a clean pressed shirt and new vest. "You look beautiful," he said, helping her into the buggy. "And you look very handsome," she replied, smiling at his obvious discomfort with the stiff collar, "though I think you'd prefer your usual attire." "Give me trail dust and saddle leather any day," he agreed, taking the reins. But Mrs. Hawkins is particular about appearances at her table. The Hawkins ranch house was impressive, a sprawling two-story structure with a wide veranda and glass windows imported from St. Louis. As they approached, Olivia's nervousness increased. These were the kind of people who could legitimize her position in Redemption Creek or destroy it completely. Mrs. Hawkins greeted them at the door, a slender woman in her 40s with shrewd eyes and a warm smile. "Dr. Sutton, we're delighted you could join us. Kyle speaks very highly of your skills. Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Hawkins. I understand you've been suffering from headaches." "Terrible ones," she confirmed, leading them into a well-appointed parlor. "Dr. Simmons says it's just female nerves, but I suspect there's more to it." Edward Hawkins rose from his chair as they entered, a tall, imposing man with silver hair and the watchful eyes of someone accustomed to authority. "Dr. Sutton," he said, extending his hand. "I've heard quite a bit about you, both good and bad." Olivia shook his hand firmly. "I imagine you have, Mr. Hawkins. I hope you'll form your own opinion," he smiled, approval flickering in his eyes. "I always do, doctor, I always do." Dinner was a pleasant surprise. The Hawkins were well-educated and widely traveled, eager to discuss everything from territorial politics to the latest medical advances. Mrs. Hawkins had attended college in the East, unusual for a woman of her generation, and was particularly interested in Olivia's medical training. "It must have been difficult," she said as they enjoyed coffee after the meal, "being one of the only women in your class." "It was," Olivia admitted, "but not as difficult as practicing medicine in a town that doesn't want me." "Yet you stayed," Edward Hawkins observed. "Why?" Olivia glanced at Kyle, who nodded encouragingly. "Because people need care, whether they recognize it or not, and because running away would only confirm what they believe, that women don't have the fortitude for difficult work." Hawkins leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You know, when Kyle first defended you in town, I thought he was just being gallant. Now I see what he saw. You've got steel in your spine, doctor." "Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet." Hawkins set down his coffee cup. "I'm offering you a position as the ranch physician. We have over 30 hands plus families living on the property. Dr. Simmons is getting old, and the ride from Silver Springs takes too long in emergencies." Olivia blinked in surprise. "That's very generous, but I've established my practice in town. Limited as it is, I have patients who depend on me." "You could maintain your town office 2 days a week," Mrs. Hawkins suggested. "We'd provide quarters here for the rest of the time." Kyle looked as shocked as Olivia felt. Clearly, this hadn't been his idea. I'll need time to consider your offer, Olivia said carefully. Of course, Hawkins agreed. But don't take too long. Opportunity rarely knocks twice in these parts. Later, as Kyle drove her back to town under a canopy of stars, Olivia was quiet, weighing the unexpected proposal. You don't have to take it, Kyle said eventually, though it would mean better pay, more respect. And more time near you, she added softly, his hands tightened on the reins. I won't pretend that wouldn't please me, but this has to be your decision based on what's best for your practice. Olivia appreciated his restraint, his refusal to pressure her. What if I want what's best for us? For this thing growing between us? Kyle pulled the buggy to a stop on a ridge overlooking the town. In the moonlight, Redemption Creek looked peaceful, almost beautiful, its uglier aspects hidden by darkness. Are you saying there is an us to consider? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. Olivia turned to face him. I think you know there is. These past weeks have been. I've never felt this way about anyone, Kyle. The confession cost her something, pride, perhaps, or the armor of independence she'd worn for so long, but the look on his face made it worthwhile. Olivia, he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. He took her hand, pressing it to his heart. I've been waiting to hear you say that. I'm not sure what happens next, she admitted. I've spent my whole life focused on medicine. I never expected to feel this way. Kyle smiled. What happens next is entirely up to us. We can take it slow, court properly, or. She prompted when he hesitated. His eyes held hers, serious and intent. Or I could ask you to marry me right now under these stars and we could start building a life together. Olivia's breath caught. Kyle, we've only known each other a few months. Sometimes a few months is all it takes to recognize what's real. He touched her cheek gently. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, just telling you where my heart stands. She leaned into his touch, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was offering: love, partnership, a future together. I need time. You have it, he assured her. All the time you need. They rode back to town in comfortable silence, the unspoken proposal hanging between them like the brightest star in the sky, beautiful, distant, full of possibility. The decision was taken out of Olivia's hands the very next day. She was examining Mrs. Weber's daughter, Margaret, whose pregnancy had progressed to 7 months, when the door to her office burst open. Tanner Harrison stood there, his face contorted with rage, a pistol in his hand. I knew it. He shouted, pointing the gun at Margaret's swollen belly. Helping unmarried girls hide their shame, just like they said back east, you're not a real doctor, just a witch who corrupts decent women. Olivia moved instinctively to shield Margaret. Mr. Harrison put the gun down. This is a medical office and you're trespassing. Shut your mouth, he snarled, waving the pistol dangerously. The smell of whiskey emanated from him. The whole town's going to know what goes on in here. The mayor's calling a meeting tonight to decide what to do about you once and for all. Margaret began to sob, clutching her belly protectively. The stress could induce early labor, Olivia realized with alarm. Please, she said, keeping her voice calm. Miss Weber needs quiet. Whatever your grievance with me, she's innocent. Innocent, Tanner laughed bitterly. She's carrying a bastard, and you're helping her hide it. He grabbed Margaret's arm roughly. Come on, girl, your father should see what his precious daughter's been up to. No, Margaret screamed, trying to pull away. Please, no, Olivia acted without thinking. She grabbed a heavy glass bottle from her desk and swung it at Tanner's head. It connected with a sickening crack, and he staggered backward, blood streaming from a gash on his temple. You crazy bitch, he growled, raising the gun again. The shot that rang out didn't come from Tanner's pistol. It came from the doorway where Kyle stood, his revolver steady in his hand. The bullet had deliberately struck the wall beside Tanner's head. Next one goes between your eyes, Harrison, Kyle said, his voice deadly calm. Drop the gun. Tanner hesitated, his hand shaking with rage or fear or both. This isn't your fight, Prescott. You made it mine when you threatened her. Kyle stepped into the room, his gun never wavering. I won't tell you again. Drop it. Something in his tone must have convinced Tanner he was serious. The pistol clattered to the floor. Margaret, Kyle said without looking away from Tanner, go out the back door. My horse is tied there. Ride to the Hawkins ranch and tell them what happened. Can you do that? The terrified girl nodded, edging toward the back room. She's not going anywhere, Tanner growled. The whole town's going to know about her condition. Let her go, Kyle said quietly, or I swear to God, Harrison, they'll be burying you tomorrow. Margaret fled. As soon as she was gone, Kyle gestured with his gun. Now get out, and if you ever come near Dr. Sutton again, it'll be the last thing you do. Tanner backed toward the door, his eyes burning with hatred. This isn't over. There's a town meeting tonight. By tomorrow, she'll be run out on a rail and you with her. After he was gone, Olivia sagged against her desk, trembling with delayed shock. Kyle holstered his gun and was at her side in an instant, gathering her into his arms. Are you hurt? He asked, examining her face anxiously. No, I'm fine, but Margaret, the stress could harm her baby. She'll be safe at the ranch. Mrs. Hawkins will look after her. He held her tightly. Olivia, we need to talk about what's happening. She pulled back slightly to look at him. The town meeting. Yes, Harrison wasn't bluffing about that. Mayor Blackwell's been gathering support to force you out officially. His jaw tightened. And now, with this incident, they'll use it as final proof that I'm unfit to practice, she finished, a cold certainty settling in her stomach. They'll say I'm hiding pregnancies, performing abortions, God knows what else. Kyle's expression was grim. We need to be ready. Pack your essential belongings and medical supplies. If things go badly tonight, we may need to leave quickly. Leave, Olivia shook her head. I'm not running away, Kyle. I've done nothing wrong. I know that, but these people aren't interested in the truth. They want a scapegoat, and you're it. He took her hands firmly in his. I'm not suggesting we run forever, just until we can make arrangements somewhere else, somewhere your skills will be appreciated. The practicality of his words struck her. He wasn't asking her to abandon her principles, just to make a strategic retreat. What about your position here? The Hawkins Ranch. Kyle's smile was wry. Hawkins knows a good foreman is easier to replace than a good doctor. Besides, he hesitated, then pressed on. I meant what I said last night. Where you go, I go, if you'll have me. The declaration was so simple, yet so profound. In the midst of crisis, he was offering her everything: his protection, his future, his heart. Yes, she said, the word escaping before she could overthink it. Yes, I'll have you, Kyle Prescott. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. His eyes widened. Olivia, are you saying? I'm saying yes to everything, to leaving if necessary, to starting over somewhere new, to being your wife if that's still what you want. The joy that transformed his face was answer enough, but he said it anyway. It's all I want, you're all I want. He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, a kiss that promised a lifetime of such moments. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Go pack what you need, he said. I'll make arrangements and come back for you before the meeting starts. As Kyle left, Olivia began gathering her most essential medical instruments and supplies. She felt strangely calm, as if accepting Kyle's proposal had settled something fundamental within her. Whatever happened tonight, she would no longer be facing it alone. By evening, word of the confrontation at Olivia's office had spread through Redemption Creek like wildfire, growing more distorted with each retelling. Some versions claimed she'd been performing illegal operations on young girls. Others suggested she'd attacked Tanner without provocation. Kyle returned as promised, bringing news that chilled her. They've formed a committee, he said grimly. Harrison, Blackwell, and some others. They're planning to revoke your right to practice and give you 24 hours to leave town. Can they do that legally? Legal doesn't mean much out here. They've got enough people riled up that they could make life impossible for you. He helped her load her packed bags onto his horse. Margaret is safe at the ranch. Mrs. Hawkins is caring for her personally and sends her thanks. Olivia nodded, taking one last look around the small office that had been her home and workplace for nearly a year. I should feel more sorrow at leaving, she mused, but all I feel is relief. That's how you know it's time to go, Kyle said softly, when staying hurts more than leaving. They were about to depart through the back door when a commotion outside drew their attention. Many voices approaching from the main street. Olivia felt a surge of panic. They're coming for me now. The meeting wasn't supposed to start for another hour. Kyle moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtain. His expression changed from wariness to confusion. It's not just the committee, he said. It looks like half the town is out there, and he broke off, frowning. Edward Hawkins is with them, and Mrs. Weber. Before Olivia could respond, there was a firm knock at the front door. Dr. Sutton, Edward Hawkins's authoritative voice called out. "May we speak with you?" Kyle and Olivia exchanged a look. This wasn't the angry mob they'd expected. After a moment's hesitation, Olivia moved to open the door. Edward Hawkins stood on her porch, flanked by Mrs. Weber and several other townspeople Olivia recognized as patients she'd treated discreetly over the months. Behind them, a larger crowd had gathered in the street. "Mr. Hawkins," she said cautiously, "what can I do for you?" "You can start by not running away," he replied, his keen eyes taking in her travel clothes and the bags visible behind her. "We've come to ask you to stay." Olivia blinked in confusion. "I don't understand. I was told there was a town meeting tonight to force me out." "There was supposed to be," Mrs. Weber said, stepping forward. "But when Margaret arrived at the Hawkins ranch and told us what happened, what that monster Harrison tried to do." She squared her shoulders. "I decided it was time to speak the truth. My husband and I went to see Mayor Blackwell directly." Hawkins nodded. "And I accompanied them, along with several ranch hands who have benefited from your care. We made it clear that forcing you out would be a grave mistake for Redemption Creek." "The mayor wasn't easily convinced," Mrs. Weber continued. "But then others began coming forward, women whose children you'd saved, men whose injuries you'd treated when they couldn't afford to ride to Silver Springs." Olivia was speechless. These were people who had come to her in secret, who had never publicly acknowledged her skills. "By the time we finished," Hawkins said with a hint of satisfaction, "Blackwell realized that removing you would cost him the next election. He's called off the meeting." "And Harrison?" Kyle asked, moving to stand beside Olivia. "Currently sleeping off a bottle of whiskey in the town jail," Hawkins replied. "Sheriff finally found his backbone and arrested him for threatening a woman with a firearm. He'll face charges when the circuit judge comes through next month." Hope began to unfurl in Olivia's chest, cautious but real. "Are you saying I can stay, that I can practice openly?" "That's exactly what we're saying," Mrs. Weber confirmed. "My husband has authorized a loan for you to establish a proper clinic if you're interested. Our daughter's condition has made us realize how desperately this town needs progressive medical care." Olivia felt Kyle's hand find hers, squeezing gently in support. "I'm overwhelmed," she said honestly. "This morning I thought I'd lost everything." "Not everything," Kyle murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. Hawkins cleared his throat. "There is one condition to our proposal, Doctor. We'd still like you to serve as physician for the ranch 2 days a week, as we discussed last night. The town needs you, but so do our people." Olivia found herself smiling, the first genuine smile she'd managed all day. "I believe that can be arranged, Mr. Hawkins." As the crowd began to disperse, many stopping to offer words of support or thanks, Olivia turned to Kyle. "It seems we won't need to leave after all." His eyes were warm as they met hers. "Does that change your answer to my question?" "Which question was that, Mr. Prescott?" she teased, happiness bubbling up inside her. "The one about being my wife," he said, taking both her hands in his. "About building a life together right here where we've both found purpose." Olivia's heart felt too full for words. Instead, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his, not caring who might see. When she finally pulled away, she whispered, "My answer is still yes, 1,000 times yes." 6 months later, on a perfect spring day, Olivia Sutton became Olivia Prescott in a ceremony attended by nearly everyone in Redemption Creek. Margaret Weber, now mother to a healthy baby boy being raised by a loving family in Silver Springs, served as her maid of honor. Edward Hawkins stood as Kyle's best man. The newlyweds made their home in a small house halfway between town and the Hawkins ranch, perfectly situated for Olivia's dual medical responsibilities. Kyle continued as foreman, but also began building a small cattle operation of their own on land Hawkins helped them acquire. Olivia's clinic thrived, attracting patients from across the territory. When a typhoid outbreak struck a neighboring settlement that summer, her quick action and modern treatment protocols saved dozens of lives. cementing her reputation as one of the finest physicians in the territory. The day she discovered she was expecting their first child, Olivia sat Kyle down in their small parlor, suddenly nervous despite their mutual desire for a family. "I won't stop practicing," she said firmly. "Even after the baby comes," Kyle laughed, gathering her into his arms. "I wouldn't expect you to. Our child will grow up knowing their mother is the most capable, determined woman in Arizona territory. And knowing their father is the man who saw value in that woman when no one else did," she added softly. "They mocked you as useless," Kyle said, his hand gently caressing her still flat stomach, "but I always knew you were worth more than any of them." As twilight settled over their home, Olivia Prescott looked at the life she'd built: a thriving medical practice, a community that had learned to respect her, a husband who adored her, and now a child on the way. She had come to Redemption Creek seeking only to practice medicine, but had found something far more precious, a place where both her skills and her heart could flourish. In the end, it wasn't just Kyle Prescott who had recognized her worth, it was Olivia herself who had proven it, one patient, one day, one challenge at a time. And in the years that followed, as their family grew to include 3 children who inherited their mother's intelligence and their father's quiet strength, the story of how Redemption Creek almost lost its finest doctor became legend, a reminder that true worth isn't always recognized at first glance, but will eventually shine through for all to see.